In Jules Verne's Journey to the Centre of the Earth, Professor Liedenbrock deciphers a message written in runes in an old book. Descend, bold traveller, into the crater of Snæfellsjökull, which the shadow of Scartaris touches before the calends of July, and you will obtain the centre of the earth, which I have done. Arni Saknussemm. Snæfells is a volcano on the tip of a western peninsula in Iceland. Jökull means glacier, so we had to take great care when climbing to the summit. Our guide brought special equipment. Crampons had to be checked to make sure they fit. Climbing harnesses had to be put on and tested. Ice axes were distributed. And we headed off into the mist and cloud to begin our climb. The first part of the walk was on volcanic rocks. There were only patches of snow here and there to begin with, but after an hour or so the patches emerged into snowfields. When the clouds cleared for a few moments, we could see the water far below, and hints of mountains ahead. We were now on a snowfield connected to the glacier. Eyþór explained that we had to walk in a single line, stepping exactly in his footsteps as we climbed. We reached the start of the glacier. As the clouds closed in, Eyþór connected us to a line of rope.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy, like knowing that you have to be on a rope, otherwise you could fall into a crevasse and not come out, but it's pretty nice.
We headed off into the cloud. Visibility was low, and we steadily climbed up the steep, snowy slope. At long last we climbed through the clouds, and could see the summit in the distance. The views of the crater and the sea to the west inspired us to climb ever upward. One by one, Eyþór unclipped us from the line. We had made it! We were on the tip of a peninsula, so the views were fantastic. Snæfell's crater was covered with icy sculptures, blown by the wind onto volcanic rock. If we wanted to descend into a crater, we would have to look elsewhere.
The next day, we walked across a lava field in southwestern Iceland. The ground was full of lava tubes, holes formed during volcanic eruptions as the outside of a lava flow solidified and the inside ran dry. Volcanic rocks littered the ground as we made our way to a small mound in the distance. We crossed a rift in the Earth's crust, where two tectonic plates are moving apart from each other, making Iceland grow bigger every year. The rift is why there are so many volcanoes in Iceland. The mound is a volcanic crater explored for the first time only 3 years ago. We put on climbing harnesses, protective helmets and torches as we prepared for the only place on Earth where you can enter the magma chamber of a volcano. They've rigged up a mechanical lift that will lower us directly into what was once the fiery mouth of this volcanic vent. Crossing the gantry to the lift feels a little like walking the plank or boarding a rocket, and the gaping hole beneath is impossible to ignore.
Are you ready, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a strange feeling being slowly swallowed up by the mouth of a volcano. The mouth is extremely narrow and our little lift only just fits. We have to be careful as we descend. The shapes of the rock on the sides of the chamber make it look like an eruption just happened yesterday. These candle-like forms are made by magma remelting and gravity pulling it down. As we descend further, the throat of the volcano begins to widen out. We are lowered into a vast open chamber that once flowed with liquid magma. From top to bottom, it's 150 meters. We were now deep inside the body of this volcano. Our guide explained that this chamber is special because all the magma has drained away. In normal circumstances, this enormous cavern would be full of magma. In the damp air of the cave, chemical reactions have changed the colours of the rocks, like the rust on a piece of iron. As well as being a beautiful sight, the colourful shapes on the walls have a greater significance. Like tree rings, the lava layers record the history of eruptions here as they piled up, one on top of another. Running vertically through the walls, this black band of rock marks the feeding channel that supplied magma from deep beneath our feet. It cuts across this cave and runs along the entire length of the ridges visible on the surface. We are standing in the middle of two tectonic plates. The walls are an open book for us to read the story of this mountain. It was time to leave this volcanic cathedral. The last eruption on this part of the rift happened 3,000 years ago, and it has been dormant ever since. But other parts of the rift have opened up far more recently.
we were on our way to Heimaey Island, just to the south of Iceland. Heimaey is a small island, barely 2 kilometers across and home to a multitude of bird life. But in 1973, this tiny fishing village was threatened when a 1,500-meter fissure in the rift opened up and covered everything in ash and lava. Although much of the town was covered in ash, the church remained, and the words above the cemetery entrance echoed Jesus' words of hope. Because I live, you also shall live. The cemetery still bears those words today, and the church still stands. Although 400 homes were buried and destroyed in the 1973 eruption, only 1 person died of gas inhalation. Everywhere you look are reminders of how close the eruption was. Now, 40 years on, some of the homes have been uncovered, and we were fortunate to be amongst the first people in the world to see inside a house in this Pompeii of the North. The impact of the heat on the roof and walls was clear, and everything inside the house was just as the family had left it 40 years ago, only filled with volcanic ash. The museum explained the incredible task of clearing the ash away from the homes. But because this was an interactive museum, we were able to experience digging in ash and uncovering the town. It was time to see Eldfell, which means mountain of fire, close up for ourselves. As we started up the trail, the wind and rain was so strong that we felt we could almost be held up by the force of the wind. We climbed 200 meters through the rain and clouds to the rim of the crater. Although we couldn't see through the rain, we could see the colored surface and the strange twisted shapes caused by the eruption. At last we came to the highest point on the crater rim, where we could explore the entrance to the underworld. The colours of the landscape were amazing. Reds, yellows, whites, blacks, shapes that were twisted and gnarled. It was impossible to forget we were standing on top of a volcano. We decided to collect some of the pumice from the ground, but as we did so...
Oh my gosh! This is hot, this is boiling! Don't throw it! Who wants to hold it?
The pumice on the surface was warm, but just underneath it was too hot to even touch. As the wind and rain howled around us, we retreated down the mountain, holding hands to prevent being blown away.
Before coming to Heimaey Island, we had spent 10 days trekking across the interior of Iceland. We had crossed vast volcanic ash plains and climbed ash hills formed by volcanic eruptions. The last day of the trek was through an area volcanically active in March 2010. Following months of small earthquakes under the Eyjafjallajökull glacier, a 500-metre fissure opened up in the rift, creating a 200-metre high lava fall. To get to the source of the lava, we had to cross this precarious ridge in the howling wind. Then traverse a steep slope assisted by chains. Climbing onto an ash-covered lava field with snow swirling around us, we approached Móði and Magni, two black craters named after the sons of Thor. The lava trail was formed in the Fimmvörðuháls eruption of 2010. As we crossed the snow, we could see the twisted lava flows that had come from the craters. We stopped to look at the lava and collect samples before heading off to Eyjafjallajökull, a volcano completely covered by an ice cap. The eruption of Eyjafjallajökull in April 2010 was explosive due to meltwater getting in the volcanic vent. The eruption threw volcanic ash several kilometres up into the atmosphere, causing planes to be grounded in northwest Europe for a week. This part of the rift on the mainland marks the crest of the mid-Atlantic ridge, but for the Icelandic people, it's the site of the Althing, the parliament where all the chieftains of Iceland met yearly for an assembly. Speakers would address crowds from the top of the ridge, and Þingvellir became the centre of Icelandic culture. Merchants, sword sharpeners and tanners would sell their goods and services. Entertainers performed. News was told from distant parts, games and feasts were held. A little further north is a place of geothermal activity. Steam vents continuously from the ground, and boiling water bubbles and pools. The name of this place is Geysir, an Icelandic word that means a spring that gushes. The term became popular and is now used for similar hydrothermal features worldwide. We were here to see Stokkr, a geyser erupting to heights of up to 30 metres every few minutes.